Okay, welcome everybody to another BenQ Australia webinar. So my name's Dan. I take care of marketing activities here at BenQ, based in the Sydney office. I'm also joined today by Jai, who is our field application engineer and head trainer, along with Sanjay, our business manager for Australia and New Zealand. So today's webinar will be a quick guide to blended learning. We're headed for about 30 minutes today, so hopefully we'll be able to cap it at the 30-minute mark. So thanks for taking the time to join us again, and let's get kicked off. So before we move on, we'll just go through some housekeeping. So this webinar is being recorded, so check back on the BenQ Australia YouTube channel for the upload in the next couple of days. Also, I'll be sending out an email to those who have registered with the link embedded in there. For questions at any time, just add them to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get back to you at the end in the Q&A section. If you'd like to get in touch with us after the webinar, you can always email us at bqausales@benq.com. So let's see the agenda. So first of all, we'll take a short insight into a couple of recent surveys and research conducted by Pivot Learning and OECD. Then we'll go through a quick introduction to blended learning and how it can be used in the classroom. We'll have a short demo of BenQ's latest in blended learning technology, and we'll have the Q&A at the end. So our blended learning future is already here. We often talk about what's the future of learning, what's coming up as far as the trends in the learning space and what's coming around the bend. But we believe that our future is already here when it comes to technology in the classroom, and it's a blended learning future. So today we'll talk about the class of post-COVID-19. So as you would all know, the approaches to safely opening schools have come with confusion and heated debate throughout 2020 and moving into 2021. But the main outcome that we want to achieve is that learning to be continued. But moving forward with balance is the key. So how are we going to do that? Balancing education and health-related priorities, balancing consistency with flexibility, balancing needs, access, and capacities. And finally, balancing curriculum delivery and outcomes with ongoing curriculum innovation. So moving forward in education, OECD did a study back in July of 2020. So obviously when we look at the study, we'll be looking back in retrospect. And they created a checklist to sustain education continuity in the second phase of the pandemic, which I suppose we are in right now. So the OECD is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And this survey consisted of over 1,000 people worldwide in the education sector from 59 countries, ranging from public and private school teachers and principals to education government officials. So let's look at their checklist. So number one being preparation. Then learning from the first phase of the pandemic. Develop protocols to maintain physical distancing in classrooms, even though we are quite lucky in Australia to have managed the pandemic quite well. So physical distancing is not so much of an issue in classrooms here. Create an effective delivery system for remote learning. Strengthen and expand learning ecosystems. Sustain and deepen teacher professional development. And finally, most importantly, develop capacity for blended learning. So the responses analysed in the OECD report indicate that the learning that has taken place during the period when schools were closed is at best only a portion of what students would have learned in school pre-COVID times. So notable findings. When we're talking about comparing the learning that students would have done normally in school versus what the learning that they have done throughout the pandemic or throughout lockdown times, 48% could not assess the effectiveness of learning continuity of the strategies put in place during this time. And 32% said that students learned less compared to what they would have learned in pre-COVID times. When surveyed about e-learning readiness in reopening plans, there was a heavy focus on reactive readiness for e-learning, including procurement of devices, internet connectivity, and training for teachers on e-learning assessment, which would help in the previous finding with 48% not being able to assess the effectiveness of the learning strategies put in place. Another important note in this report was screen time and child well-being. So as screen time increases, so does health risks to students. And this is where eye care is particularly important. So having a device such as an interactive flat panel or monitor that has a low blue light function or eye care functions in general can help to minimize these risks. Okay, coming back a little bit closer to home with this next report and having a look at what Australian principals had to say on the impact of COVID in 2020. So in late 2020, Pivot Professional Learning, in partnership with the Coalition of Australian Principals, surveyed 456 school leaders across the country about how their work had changed during the COVID-19 pandemic. Pivot Professional Learning is an educational data and insights company based in Melbourne, Australia, providing research-based guidance for school leaders, classroom practitioners, and others in the education sector. Pivot is supported by the Coalition of Australian Principals, which is a collaborative group of 6 national peak principal associations, including the Australian Primary Principals Association and the Catholic Secondary Principals of Australia. So the next report refers to a value called the Ixia Value quite often. So the Ixia Value is an index of community socio-educational advantage, which was created by the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority, specifically to enable fair comparisons of the National Assessment Program. So the Ixia Value has a median score of 1,000. So a Ixia score below 1,000 is a lower socio-educationally advantaged school, and a value above 1,000 is the opposite to that. Okay, some notable findings in this report. The pandemic's impact on students and teachers. So a large majority of principals reported that the pandemic had negatively impacted teachers' mental health and well-being. And on the other hand, 73% of principals thought that the pandemic had a negative impact on students' well-being and mental health. Higher Ixia school principals were more concerned about students' social isolation, while those at lower Ixia schools were more worried about the lack of routine and access to technology. So school leaders outlined a few different reasons why they thought that the pandemic had negatively impacted students' well-being. So the lack of face-to-face contact, fewer social activities, and a lack of consistency or routine. And that's the one we'll focus on when we're talking about blended learning. Now moving on to differences by socioeconomic status of schools. So the below table shows the concerns that school leaders had when talking about access to technology. So the lower Ixia schools had concerns about devices for staff and students, home internet access for staff and students, and also information technology support. The higher Ixia schools didn't raise these concerns, as they most likely would already have them covered in previous years. Access to technology in 2021 is a priority, especially for lower socioeconomic schools. So as you can see in this infograph, 52% of school leaders said that the impact on student learning was negative throughout COVID-19 and 2020. Priorities for investment. So the light blue bubble here is representing the lower Ixia schools, and 38% of principals and leaders surveyed said that they were focusing on devices for students and also internet for students at home. So there's a big emphasis on investment for devices and internet for students, both in class and at home. However, regardless of the school Ixia value, the two top priorities were digital pedagogy training and training in supporting student well-being. So what we need to do is prepare to continue education. So whether it's tackling bushfires we had a couple of years ago here in Australia, flash flooding and things that we've seen around New South Wales recently, or things like pandemics, we need to prepare the technology to be able to continue the education and the delivery of the curriculum. So what do we need for successful blended learning? There's three key points here. So whiteboarding, which most schools will have this implemented already, in-class collaboration, and also remote collaborations. So what does that look like? So a student at home joining the class remotely, and then we've got a class collaborating inside the class and in the cloud, joining that remote session as well. The key here is student inclusion and engagement. So let's look at the scenarios. So we've got a single screen setup, which you'll see mostly in Australian schools, with either an interactive flat panel or a projector at the front, and then a remote student logging in from home on their monitor. We also have the dual screen setup, where you might have an interactive flat panel with a projector screen next to it, either extending the screen or showing a different type of content. And then we've also got the student logging in remotely from home from their monitor. We'll be focusing a little bit more on the dual screen setup. So how do we facilitate blended learning? So blended learning with video conferencing collaboration using the dual screen setup. So we've got the interactive flat panel as the hero at the front of the room. We've got a projector projecting next to that. In this case, it's a smart projector. We've got a webcam to cover the size of the room. We've also got collaborative software like the EasyWrite Cloud Whiteboard or InstaShare. So in the distance learning at home scenario, we've got height adjustable eye care monitor, a webcam to suit the size of the room, and also again, the collaboration software, something like EasyWrite Live. So what about the software? So as we know, sharing is caring, and we're using a plethora of different devices in the classroom when it comes to education. So what we need to be able to do is allow the teacher to mirror their device, and also we need the students to be able to share their work to the front of the class. So how do we achieve that? Through things like two-way mirroring, two-way touchback, split screen so that more than one student can share, multi-platform compatibility, so something like on the left-hand side with the different types of devices, and in-app sharing permission control, so it stops any unsolicited sharing of content that's not wanted or needed. So when it comes to remote and in-class collaboration, we've got a few different scenarios. So the first one being the face-to-face class, where the teacher sets up a cloud whiteboard on the interactive flat panel inside the classroom, and the students log in from their own devices at their desks. Alternatively, we've got a distance learning setup where the teacher can start a cloud whiteboarding session at home or in the class, wherever they may be, with using EasyWrite Live, and the students log in from their home and their own home device. Obviously, there's a scenario to have a mixture of both as well. So you can forget the germs. So if you know anything about BenQ Technology, we're very serious about the healthcare approach and classroom care in particular. So on our interactive flat panels, we've got the air quality sensor, we've got the antibacterial coating utilizing the nano ionic silver, and also we've got smart eye care solutions. So things like flicker-free, low blue light, and anti-glare technologies. So what we'll do now is jump over to a live demo. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that, guys. All right, I'll take over the camera work here for Jai. So first of all, I'll give you a bit of a snapshot of what we've actually set up here. So obviously these devices won't necessarily necessarily be in the same room as such, because we've got our home set up here, which we saw in the presentation, a similar setup. So we've got the laptop plugged into the GW2780T, which is our eye care brightness intelligence monitor. We've also got the DVY21, which is the small huddle space or home office video conference camera. So this would be the setup that we would have at home. As you can see, we've got a cloud whiteboard session logged in here, mirroring from the laptop. And then we go across to our RP series interactive flat panel, which we are hosting our Easy Write session here. We've also got the DVY22 camera, which is perfect for most size, mid-sized classrooms. Anything going higher, you would probably need a pan, tilt, zoom, something like the DVY23, which we've got as well. In addition to that, we've also got the smart projector set up here, also in tight confinements, but essentially we've got a presentation, my presentation that I was presenting from before, up on the screen there using the AMS file manager there. So what we've got here, I might get Jai to jump in and just annotate on the board just to show we've got that set up all connected through the cloud. So Jai likes to squiggle lines. He's doing a really good job of that one, as always. So then we've got here emulating on the screen. So that's all logged in. Any number of students can log into a whiteboarding session and also cross-collaborate as well. So Jai, I might get you to, just getting rid of that, and that I might get you to grab the remote and go back, just emulate the screen from the IFP. So what we're just doing now, we're just selecting the HDMI source, which is actually coming out of the HDMI out of the RP series here. So what I'll get the wide shot of Jai doing his lines again. So this is really great for extended collaboration, but also, so if the students are at the back of the class, they may not be able to see a 65-inch panel, for instance, and it will actually extend the display up to 120 inches, depending on the size of the screen. So as you can see there, we've got it cross-collaborating across all of our devices. So the third scenario is, and I'll get Jai to wirelessly cast to the smart projector. This won't be able to be shown in the remote session at home when the student's logging in, but this will be more about the in-class scenario where the teacher will be wirelessly casting their device. So Jai's just switching back to the smart projector, and there we've got an iPad just shared using the AirPlay protocol. But there's several ways that we can share from a device, but the main thing is that it's wireless and really easy for the teacher to share that content. So again, you can emulate what's happening on the interactive flat panel across to the smart projector by plugging it in, or you can have a completely different source running on the smart projector to show something like a world map while the students are collaborating in a whiteboard session. So I think that sort of covers the main scenarios that you might see in the classroom and also at home. So I might just stop this sharing. I'll get Jai to do it, the expert. All right, coming back over. All right, so we're back. So let me check, see if we've got anything in the chat. We've actually got a couple of things in the chat. Thank you, and Kit. Not audible. Hopefully we've been audible up until this point. No one said anything, but early on. Okay, that's all right then. Sorry, I wasn't managing the chat section too well. I was juggling 15 different things, but apologize for that. So I've got Sanjay here with me. I'm going to try and see if I can get him on the camera because I want to see his pretty face. Which way I've got to go? Here we go. Let's see. Pop in there, Sanjay. Let me see. There he is. Okay. All right. Let me turn on your microphone.
Thank
There you go, Sanjay. Bring yourself around. That's
Yeah.
it. All right. So while we wait for any questions to come in the Q&A, I know we went through that very quickly, Sanjay,
Yes.
but there's probably a couple of things we can probably embellish on a little bit more. We can
Sure.
discuss how things are actually being implemented in schools. So blended learning is different to, I suppose, many people, depending on who you ask. But in Australian schools, because most of the kids are in class, if they're not stuck in floodwaters or whatever it may be. So what have you seen being the most used scenarios when it comes to technology in the schools?
So I'll give you an example. We got a client who deals with it's basically a cram school, and they deal with a lot of students who come after the school into the cram school for their sessions. So during the pandemic, when there was a social distancing in place, restrictions to go out. So what these guys were facing challenges, the school was facing challenges, that how do they still operate and provide services to those students who is paying really heavy fees, and they can't give them the services they were providing. So basically they reached out to us. So they had the digital whiteboards in place. So we suggested them some cameras, and we given them some speaker microphones as a solution, which allowed their teachers to remotely join kids to the Zoom sessions, and so they can at least dial in remotely and can deliver the lessons to them. And then later, when they were, obviously, when teachers got the cameras, this was the first time they were in front of the camera, so they were basically camera shy, as well as they were not familiar with the technology. So we helped them with setups initially, and after, obviously, a couple of days, they were getting used to the technology, because this was, as I said, this was the first time they were into these scenarios. And then they were able to deliver those lessons. But at the same times, the kids who were participants participating from the home devices were also struggling, and they had their parents sitting next to them, trying to help them connect to the Zooms and Teams sessions, because these were the first time students were also connecting to the devices. And some were facing challenges, like they didn't have the cameras. Some were facing challenges, their devices were too old, even though they have good connections, internet connections. So of course, they were not device ready, or not ready with the time of this kind of change. So obviously this cram school started investing into the devices ASAP, to make their schools, make their teachers as well as student devices ready. So that was a perfect example where the blended learning was taken in place, where everyone has to start upgrading their technologies to learn how to get ready for that kind of a scenario, where they have to remotely join and participate and learn things where they were not used to it. Also, over the time, we figured it out that the school was showcasing their digital whiteboard and using the cameras, but they were facing other issues, that how do we see students, um, if they want to see multiple students at the same time, how do they do that? Because with conference apps like Zoom and Teams, when you're using your whiteboard, then you don't see the pictures quite often of the students, how they're responding to the learning, if they have understood what the teacher is trying to deliver. So they implemented a projector, smart projectors in the classrooms. So they were casting video conference, just the faces of the remote participants on the projector, so they can actually capture uh, their reactions to when teachers were delivering something from the digital whiteboard using the software. So that's what the another addition in terms of the technologies into that
Exactly.
classroom, and that was basically, that has given them some sort of a solution where they were using both interactive flat panels and digital whiteboards to deliver the lessons, but they were also using large screen like projectors to capture their reactions and their faces basically
Exactly.
to see how they are reacting to the delivery of the lessons, which made teachers really comfortable because when you're delivering the lesson and you don't know, you can't see if they are taking that in a positive manner or not, it becomes really challenging. So that's the example I always
Yeah.
give for blended learning, where I had personally involved and understood what the teachers were expecting and what they required during that times.
Definitely. It is a really great case study. Just going back to what you said about seeing the reactions of the students, making sure the students are
Yeah,
even there
yeah,
in their home office or
correct.
in their home classroom.
And
Um,
that's where they found out the parents were sitting next to them.
so they got
And
a lot of data through that
yes,
way.
and
Yeah,
then they found out the teachers were asking why the parents are there. So parents were involved, telling them they are trying to teach the kids how to, connect to the sessions, how to use the technologies. Of course, it's good that parents were involved, but that's where they got to know why parents were sitting there.
100%.
Yeah.
And a couple of things in my mind, just to go back to the scenario where we've got the students on the smart projector with their faces. Something we didn't demo
Yep.
before, very quick demo, so we couldn't demo the full capabilities of all of the
Sure.
technology, but through the smart projector, we can load Zoom on there
Yes.
and be able to have that Zoom session running on the projector natively.
Yep.
So there's no necessarily having any cables plugged in. We
Yep.
can run that, start up a Zoom session, send it to the students at home, and have your cloud whiteboard side by side with your Zoom session,
Yep.
and making sure then counting attendance, making sure everyone's listening, understanding, and when we got that camera set up as well, and the microphone in the PC, being able to respond
Yep.
and collaborate and actually participate in the lesson no matter where they are.
Correct.
And the perfect example is the cram schools. But going back even further to the research that was done,
Sure.
showing
The
the lack
stress.
or the lack of readiness,
Yes.
and it seemed like everybody just wasn't ready.
Yeah, that's look. No one expects these kind of things, and the way forward is we make ourselves ready for things. If let's say things like this happen in future, we need to be ready. We need to be prepared. Of course, it has brought us in further. It has brought us forward in time in terms of using technology for both teachers as well as students who were obviously not used to these kind of systems before. But going forward, I think if we invest in technologies in time and in right technologies in time, I think we can handle the situations better and reduce that stress levels at both teachers and students level to much more lower rate.
For sure. And something that the Pivot Learning Study pointed out, which is very, very important, is the disparity between low socioeconomic schools and higher ones, which have more advantages. And we really need to help close that gap. And what I see is the products need to be very high value products, so they can do a lot, they can cover a lot of ground, but not necessarily be the most expensive. Needs to be able to fit that demographic and also the budgets of certain schools, because we know that the budget can fluctuate dramatically from school to school.
Definitely, and we do have all the solutions which we can work out with the schools and make sure they works in their budget. So we got all the
Yeah,
solutions, and we are always ready to help our customers and especially the educations, schools and department.
for sure. Now let's check if we got. Doesn't look like we got anything in the Q&A. What I'll do is I'll just drop in while everyone's still here, if they are still here, just some links into the chat for the studies that I cited, but also the BenQ website as well. So if you just check that, you can see before you go. I've just added that there. But if there's no other questions, we might sign off, Sanjay. I
Yeah.
just want to thank everybody very much for joining us again. Make sure you look out for the monthly webinar from
Yes.
BenQ Australia. Sanjay won't always be here, but when I can drag him in, I always do, because I love having him here.
Thank you so
Um,
much.
But thanks again, everyone. If you want to visit us online, you can go to the BenQ Australia website, and up the top of the page, there'll be the business tab. And when you go in there, you'll be able to find the IFP, the smart projector, the eye care monitors, and many more things as well. If you want to get in touch with us, like I mentioned before, BQAU sales at benq.com, or you can get in touch with your BenQ representative, whether it be through a reseller or a distributor. But thank you again, and we'll sign off, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
Thank you, everyone.